tomorrow. Laura, what do you got?
All right, Sean, thanks so much. Good evening from Washington. Thanks for joining us tonight. News is breaking all over the world. We have you covered from every angle. You just saw President Trump wrapping up that major speech in South Korea. We're going to have analysis soon. He's heading to China, and this could be the most important part of this Asian trip. We're going to have reaction, a lot on the line there. And in the Virginia governor's race, we're going to tell you why the Republican Ed Gillespie could not get it done. He was on last night with us. Could not win it there. And the left keeps disparaging people of faith. What is going on? The power of prayer, that's apparently a threat to people. We're going to have more on all those stories throughout the hour. But first, the latest on Sunday's horrific mass shooting in Sutherland Springs, Texas. The more we learn about Devin Patrick Kelly, the more shocking it is that he was ever able to purchase a gun. Now, not only did this freak assault his wife and fracture the skull of his stepson, but he also escaped from a mental hospital in that same time frame. Now, despite this, the Air Force never entered him into an FBI database, and that cleared the way for him to purchase the weapons he used during the shooting spree. Absolutely incredible. Now, back in Sutherland Springs, we're hearing about the many acts of heroism at the First Baptist Church from those who survived and from those who, of course, succumbed. By now, you've heard about Stephen Williford, the plumber who stopped the shooting by engaging with the killer with a gun of his own. And tonight, we're learning more about another person, Joanne Ward. This mother of four died in a heroic attempt to shield her own children from the killer. Joining us now from Sutherland Springs is a dear friend of this heroic woman, and she's the family spokesperson at a very difficult time, Vonda Smith, and also Texas's Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick, who spoke at length with the hero, Mr. Williford, tonight. Both of you, it is good to see you both under such difficult circumstances. Vonda, I want to start with you. I had a chance to talk to you briefly. You just happened to be listening to my radio show this morning, and you called in because you had just spent time with Joanne Ward's daughter, 9 years old,
right,
who had been in that church. Tell us what she told you.
The first thing she told me was that the reason that she didn't get shot like everybody else was because her mama threw her on the ground and told her to hide. And she did. And she said, I didn't get shot because I was hiding.
And she
proceeded.
Was minor injury, correct? And yet
she
two
had
of
none.
her siblings. She had none. Two of her siblings.
None.
Died. Correct.
She wasn't injured. She could have been. She says that a bullet went right by her face and knocked off her glasses, and she was not even scathed. So as soon as Joanne threw her on the ground, she stayed hiding. And I'm sorry, what was your next question?
And two of her siblings died in this horrific attack.
Two of her siblings died, yeah. Joanne, as soon as she threw her on the ground, she scooped up her other three that were sitting next to her in a pew. Ryland, who's 5, and Brooke, who is 5, and Emily, who's 7. And she immediately covered them with her body. And that's exactly how Rihanna, described it. She just said she was on top of them. And I guess it all happened so fast, I assume. But the mother, as we know, the shooter.
This is the mother's ultimate sacrifice. Dan, as Lieutenant Governor of Texas, you've presided over natural disaster in the last few months, and now spending time tonight with Stephen Williford, the hero in all of this. Mother, Joanne Ward, who is deceased, was killed. Stephen survived this, but he engaged the killer. Tell us what he told you tonight.
Yes. I had an extraordinary hour with him and a pastor earlier this evening, and I asked Stephen permission of what to say on his behalf, and he said, tell Laura and tell the country, tell the world I'm not a hero. I'm a victim. He said, I lost my friends I lost people in my community. He doesn't want to be treated like a hero, Laura. He just reacted. He said God gave him great presence of mind and calmness as he walked out that door facing the shooter. He said he'd like to go to the hospital. As I did later tonight, I went to the hospital to visit some of those who are wounded and have lost others. And he said, I'd like to go to the hospital with you, but I just can't right now. He's a Christian, most of all, he said. Dan, tell everyone I'm a Christian, and I'm part of this faith community that is going to stand strong. He's a humble man. He's a hero to all of us, but to himself, he's another victim, and that's how he wants to be seen.
Dan, is there any doubt in your mind, after spending time with him tonight, as distraught as he is, and I want to hear from both of you on this, that were he not the type of man he is, I know he's humble, he doesn't want any credit, but President Trump was right. We would have had a lot more carnage. This man was hell-bent on shooting up whatever he could find, it looked like.
I said to him, Laura, I said, Stephen, I know you don't want to be a hero, but understand that your reaction probably saved many other lives. There would have been a police shootout, for example, that police officers could have been wounded or killed. They drove by another church in the chase. The gunman could have stopped at that church, because obviously this was more than just domestic violence. For me, Laura, this was just another attack on people of faith in this world. Whether you're Jews or Muslims or Christians today, people of faith are under attack. And so there's no question in my mind that Stephen saved the lives of countless others, and is still wrestling with this. He's not getting a lot of sleep, and he's still working through this. But there'll be a time that he'll tell his story in detail. But now he just wants to be known as a Christian and a victim.
Wow. And to think, Vonda, about how much our society focuses on celebrity and what you have and what you're wearing and where you went to school, all of that. And at a time like this, you see a mother's love for her children. I have 3 children, and I got it down on my knees tonight, and I prayed with my children for the people of Texas again.
Yes.
My kids don't really understand it. They're little, but I was crying myself, thinking of her ultimate sacrifice. Are you surprised, knowing Joan as you do, that she did this instinctively for her children?
Joanne always had her children at the top of her mind, her ideas, her thoughts, everything. When we would go to lunch, even with Joanne sitting there with her children, we couldn't carry on a normal conversation with her because she would be interrupted by her children, not because they were misbehaved. They were perfectly behaved. But if they needed anything, it was the drop of a hat. It was about her children. And that's Joanne's heart. It was always giving her children first place and her family. And for her to do this, she always told me, even, and it's the thing that you hear sometimes parents say, but you never think they'll have to. She said, I would die for my children. And she ended up having to do that in the very end. And that does not surprise any of us in this community that knows her, because she loved them so. And she gave it up for them, ultimately.
Laura?
Dan,
Laura,
Dan, go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I just
She
wanted
was
to
the
share
epitome
something
of
with you when I went to
Christ.
the hospital tonight. This faith that we're seeing, this faith-based community, is unbelievable. And I went to visit a lady. The names have not been released, so I won't release her name. But she had been shot multiple times. Her granddaughter was the floor above her in critical condition. Her husband was killed. This is just unimaginable. I went and visited another lady who today was just, for the first time, I was maybe the first person she had talked to. And she said, tell me, did they all die? I wasn't ready for that. But the lady I had visited previously had said to me, I lost 80% of my friends. I lost my husband. My granddaughter's in critical condition. But a church family went to heaven. An entire church family went to heaven together, and we will be together with them again. And that's what I shared with the other lady when she said, did they all die? And I said, no, but a church family went together to heaven to meet with the Lord. Laura, you and I have known each other a long time as fellow Christians. I've never seen a statement of faith like we have seen. A pastor said earlier to me just a few minutes ago, Dan, a Lone Star welcomed Jesus Christ into this world, and a Lone Star state is showing that faith is stronger than evil and hate. And
Joanne,
it's an amazing
Joanne,
thing that's happening in this little town.
Joanne, I want to say you reached out to Joanne Ward a few years ago. She was having a really tough time. You helped bring her to Christianity. Ironically, she goes to and connects with this church, and she ends up dying there. Now, a lot of the atheists and a lot of the cynics will say, see, the faith killed her. She got close to God, and look at what happened to her. There is no God. How would you respond to that?
I don't even know what to say to that. I just know that this woman's faith was so strong. I may not have brought her to Christianity. I know that her faith was wavering, and her faith strengthened over the 3 years I've known her. And she did end up in church, and that is where she died. And the thing that I know that Joanne would want people to know is that live for Christ no matter what. She was dragging people to church. She was begging her best friend Cody to go to Sunday school with her. That was her heart. And no, evil is here, and that is not God's plan. God's plan is not for evil, it's for good. And if we would turn to Him, He's got an ultimate good for us in store. And it may not be here on this earth, but it'll end up that way. And that's the end of the story, because we know the end of the book.
Lieutenant Governor Patrick and Vonda, thank you for sharing this incredibly difficult moment with us. But I think we need to confront evil, and we need to call it out. We need to stand for what is right. And you helped do that for us tonight. Thank you, both.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now a continuing angle. Last night we told you how some on the left have begun to attack anyone who offers thoughts and prayers in the wake of this horrific shooting. Well, the political and media elite are still at it. Watch.
Thoughts and prayers are not going to stop the next mass shooting.
Thoughts and prayers didn't stop a troubled person from buying assault-grade weapons that took the lives of 26 people in an instant.
My colleagues right now are doing a moment of silence in the House of Representatives chambers. I respect their right to do that, and I myself have participated in many of them, but I can't do this again. I've been to too many moments of silences.
Now, compare that to what Sunday's hero, Stephen Williford, had to say about the role of faith.
I'm no hero. I am not. I think my God, my Lord, protected me and gave me the skills to do what needed to be done.
Joining us now for reaction is Jerry Falwell, Jr., president of Liberty University. Jerry, you're a believer. You've been watching this play out over the last 72 hours. The horror, the loss, the sacrifice, the sadness, the attacks on prayer. Your reaction to this?
I just think it's shameful and disrespectful to the families of the victims for anybody to try to politicize something like this. I think we need to love, support, pray for these people, for their families, for the friends of everyone involved, and to keep them in our prayers. I think that's what we are supposed to do. We've got 15,000 students here. I'm not a pastor or reverend, but I'm president of Liberty University, and they've all been praying for all the families of the victims. We had one student who lost his in-laws in the killing in Texas, and he and his family are on the way back from Okinawa right now to attend the funeral. And it's a time for us to grieve with them, not to try to make political points when something like this happens.
Why are so many in the secular left, so many in Hollywood, you know who they are, and so many in politics, why are they so afraid of a public expression of faith, whether it's a sentiment expressed or a tweet, pray for the, you can pray and also advocate for legislative changes, or pray and say, gosh, how did this guy get a gun? You can do both things, or you could choose not to pray. But why are they so offended and bothered by prayer, Jerry?
I can't speak for them. I don't understand that at all, Laura. I just know that our country was built on a Judeo-Christian ethic, and it's something that all of us, one of the reasons this country's been successful is because of that ethic, because of the way our people have not just been a great people, but a good people. And they've lived by the teachings of Jesus to love our neighbors as ourselves. And really, that's the only way to end evil acts like this. You can outlaw guns, and evil is going to, the only way to stop evil is to change people's hearts. And that's just so elementary, so simple. I don't understand why anybody would think that making a gun illegal would stop a criminal who's willing to murder somebody else from buying a gun illegally.
He had the wherewithal. He had the wherewithal, Jerry, to commit a terrible, horrible series of killings here, whether with a pressure cooker bomb or with something else. He had the military training. He could go on YouTube, watch the video, and do it. He could have done it.
That brave neighbor who had the AR-15 who stopped him, if guns were outlawed, he wouldn't have had a gun, and who knows how many other people would have been killed. I think the lesson from this shooting is that we need more good people to have guns at every event.
They ridicule you for saying that. Jerry, you say that, and they're going to clip this tape, they're going to run it on a late-night show, and they're just going to go blah, 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 blah. You guys always say that, and then we get people dead.
It's just common sense. At Liberty, we have teachers who carry guns with a concealed carry permit. Every concert, every sporting event, every church service should have a certain number of people with concealed carry permits with guns. I know a church here locally, all their deacons carry guns on Sunday morning. And most mass shootings like this occur in gun-free zones. That's been true since 1950. This one's a little different, but it's unusual. But that's the only way to stop evil. It takes police about 11 minutes to respond, and these shootings are over in 5 minutes. So I don't know why that's so, to me, it's common sense. I don't know why that's so controversial. It's just Liberty, we're right now adding magnetometers to all our events, just like at an airport. We're bringing in dog-sniffing dogs.
That's depressing.
Next time you come back to Liberty, it's going to be a lot harder for you to get in and out, Laura. But it's just what we have to do.
Now that is depressing. But Jerry, thank you for spending some time with us tonight for this perspective. And when we return, there's a question. You heard about the magnetometers and the X-ray machines, but what about an armed citizenry? Does it make us safer, really safer? We're going to have that white-hot debate up next. Welcome back. A killer gunned down 26 innocents in Sutherland Springs, Texas on Sunday, but gun rights advocates say there would have been likely even more carnage if a citizen hadn't confronted the killer with his own gun. The left, well, they're having a different reaction, of course. This is the great social scientist, Stephen Colbert.
5,000 years ago, if your village had a tiger coming into it every day and was eating people, you wouldn't do nothing. You would move the village, you would build a fence, or you would kill the tiger. You wouldn't say, well, I guess, someone's going to get eaten every day, because the price of liberty is tigers.
At least Stephen Colbert is for fences. Joining us now for reaction in Idaho is Mark Furman, former LAPD detective, Fox News contributor, and with me in Washington, Igor Volsky. He's the director of Guns Down. It's a group that wants to dramatically reduce the number of guns in the United States. Igor, we won't do the whole interview in Russian. We were talking.
We can.
All right, let's talk about what happened in Texas. This individual was able to buy weapons despite the fact that he's a domestic abuser, child abuser, escaped from a mental facility. That should never have happened. It's against federal law. There was a mistake done at the Air Force level. We don't know who, but something happened. We have a lot of people dead. What is your reaction to the fact that this was not properly entered into the database?
Well, that's a problem, and that needs to be addressed. But we also need to address a situation where we have 300 million guns floating around in this country. So even if he would have been stopped by the database, he could have gone online and purchased a semi-automatic weapon, purchased a high-capacity magazine that allowed him to gun down all those people. That's why those things should be banned.
Mark, can you go online if you're a guy who commits domestic abuse and escapes from a mental facility and just buy a 9mm, no problem?
No, if you're prohibited through a purchase at a gun store, you're prohibited by any gun sales on the internet or in many gun shows. I mean, there are states where you could purchase a weapon at a gun show, but this probably wouldn't be what occurred in this instance.
Stephen Williford, Igor, was able to hunt this guy down, get in a car with another guy. They chased him, which we only found out today. They were in pursuit of the killer for 11 miles, I guess in a truck. And they raced behind him. He did shoot him. Don't know how bad the injury was. The guy ultimately drove into a ditch, self-inflicted gunshot wound. If he hadn't chased him with a gun, shot him with a gun, he may in fact have engaged police or killed others. Do you
Well, I think we're all thankful that this guy intervened. Absolutely.
With a gun, right? He didn't intervene with a powder puff. He had a gun.
Well, yes.
Throw marbles at him?
Well, in this instance, you're right. But if you look at, for instance, what happened in Colorado last week, where there was a shooting at a Walmart store, people pulled out their guns, and it created intense chaos for police. I mean, again, we have 300 million guns in America.
So what do you want to do about that?
If guns really kept us safer, we wouldn't have more than 300 mass shootings in 2017 alone. So what I want to do is get rid of the assault weapons that this guy used, get rid of the high-capacity magazines that allow them to spray these bullets. That's a good start. And then let's have a conversation about how we move this country towards fewer guns, where guns are harder to get, when you need an actual license and training to have a gun. That's what's going to keep us safer. That's what a lot of other countries have done. It's why they have, comparatively a lot less killings than we do.
Yeah, I like the idea of training, because I think anyone who has a weapon should know how to use it, should know safety. Mark, you spoke about this today with me earlier on radio, that individuals who carry weapons concealed, it's kind of, cool, carry a weapon concealed, but if you don't know how to use that weapon, you could buy yourself into a lot of problems. However, this man was an NRA instructor, correct? He knew what he was doing with an AR-15. That it can be very accurate if you know how to use it, and it helped save more lives.
Well, you're right, Laura, and he had the presence of mind, and he actually, through his training in the NRA, being an instructor, he actually understood and assessed the situation, and then he took appropriate action with controlled fire. If you listen to what he said, he probably didn't even realize what he was actually describing, but he was describing not only well-placed, but controlled fire. And what's interesting about training, there's nothing wrong with it, and anybody that carries a weapon would probably invite the training and really enjoy the training. But here's the downside of gun control. Criminals, gang members do not purchase guns legally, and if you get rid of legally purchased guns, those weapons are still in the hands that are committing the lion's share of homicides in this country.
Igor?
Well, criminals may also not follow speed limits, yet we have speed limits. We have seatbelt laws that have...
We don't have a constitutional amendment regarding speeding.
Well,
that's the problem.
Justice Scalia said it best. There are reasonable regulations and restrictions on guns. Almost every single gun restriction has stood up to that interpretation. So the Second Amendment is not absolute. We can be smart in how we solve this. I mean, we are really the smartest nation in the world. Again, these weapons, these high-capacity magazines, these assault weapons are a big problem. They're used in every single mass shooting, Laura. The one we saw in Vegas, the one we're seeing now. I mean, I'm sure we can come to an agreement here that you shouldn't be able to have an assault weapon, stack it up with rounds of bullets, and just shoot people, right?
First of all, that's a crime. That's a federal crime. So no, you can't do that. But just like you can't legally purchase fentanyl, we have individuals across the country who are buying fentanyl on the black market. I think Mark's point is, and I know you're very well intentioned on this, you want a good outcome, but I think Mark's point is, if you're criminally minded, you will commit carnage. Carnage is on your mind. You're going to do it. You're going to do it with a gun you get illegally. You're going to do a Tsarnaev Brothers deal with a pressure cooker bomb. You're going to throw acid on people's faces. Whatever you want to do to commit carnage, you'll get something to do.
Yeah.
So I would say, on your point, high-capacity magazines, I guess people could ban those and see how that goes. But in the end, we're dealing with depravity, evil, people with spousal abuse. They've been abused. I think there is a mental health aspect to this that is real.
Oh, I agree with you. That's certainly a piece of it. But again, we have to make sure that those people don't have the easy access to guns
he
they
shouldn't
have
have.
today.
Yeah, and Mark, the fact that the Air Force still has not released the results of what has to be a fairly simple investigation. I mean, with all the computer capacity we have, putting people on these gun registry, the bureaucracy, you can cut through it to find out whose responsibility it was to enter this information into this database about this freak, mentally unstable freak, who was able to commit this horrific carnage. And I want to know, are there other people whose names weren't entered onto this database? Other spousal abuse convicts? Other people who escaped from mental institutions? Would they forget to enter them on a list too? We should know about that.
Well, Laura, I'll end the mystery. Some young airman was given the responsibility with a stack of reports to enter it, and they either forgot, they dismissed it and just ignored it, forgot about it.
We need to know.
It doesn't really matter why. They know, I mean, the law is absolute, and the Air Force is admitting it should have been done. So it's one of these things that occurred, but it didn't, and it wouldn't have stopped this shooting. This man had a mental defect. This man was a wife beater, a child beater, a dog abuser. This guy was going to get a weapon, and he was going to take out his revenge on his in-laws or anybody that knew them, and that's what he was going to do. And it doesn't really matter if he bought a gun at the local, gun store or he didn't. And as far as the idea that criminals are going to be somehow alerted, well, I guess we just can't buy this gun because they're illegal. The only people that will have assault rifles, such as in South Chicago, where 762 people were murdered last year, that is the weapon of choice now, assault rifles, none of which were obtained legally. Not one.
Well, how often do you hear about machine guns being used in these shootings? You don't. You know why? Because they're very, very heavily regulated under current law, back to a 1934 law. So here we have a
they're regulated, but they're out there.
If you regulate and restrict weapons and you ensure that they're really not in circulation, that means the people with the mental conditions that we're talking about who shouldn't have guns simply can't have access to them. That's why I'm saying it's not enough to just do background checks. You got to go after the guns themselves.
Right. Do you think so? You think people are just going to turn them in, and how does that work? I mean, the government confiscates. I mean, how practically does this work?
Well, look, I mean, there's a bill right now, HR 4052, that would ban these high-capacity magazines that we've been talking about. Dianne Feinstein for years has been talking about reintroducing the assault weapon ban. By the way, if that had still been in place, this guy would not have been able to get this kind of weapon, and all of the shootings that we've been hearing about recently also would not have happened, or at least would not have happened with that weapon.
Mark,
that again,
Mark, you can close it out.
Well, you can say it won't happen, but if you've got, as you've cited, 200 million guns, that means you've probably got about 5 or 6 or 700 million magazines. So possession of a magazine really wouldn't be a crime.
3D printing, I have to say. Yeah, you can 3D print a magazine, by the way, now, so that's also out there. Both of you, provocative conversation. Thank you so much. And still ahead, fresh off his speech in South Korea, President Trump heading to Beijing. Will he stand up to the Chinese president or back down on his campaign pledge to crack down on China's market manipulation in the hopes of getting their help in containing North Korea? All coming up. President Trump just wrapped up his speech in South Korea, and he's heading to China at any moment now. The Chinese are literally promising to roll out the red carpet for him. And China's trying to avoid facing consequences for their rampant cheating on trade. And the president may let them off the hook so long as they help him contain a rogue North Korea. Here's President Trump talking tough on China and trade during the 2016 campaign.
You look at what China is doing to our country in terms of making our product. They're devaluing their currency, and there's nobody in our government to fight them.
But now his message has changed dramatically.
I applaud China for breaking off all banking relationships with North Korea, something that people would have thought unthinkable even 2 months ago. I want to thank President Xi.
Now, America has serious problems with China. It's the world's most populous country, and it's aiming to edge us out economically and militarily. And by the way, they have an ambitious plan. Many of you have not heard of this, but it's called Made in China 2025. Now, check it out. It's a 10-year program, and the goal is to transform China into an advanced manufacturing leader, especially in the following: information technology, robotics, space and commercial aviation equipment, biomedical engineering, rail manufacturing, everything. Basically everything. Tools, 3D printing, I could say software engineering, goes on and on. And we need to understand this, that China, even if they do help us with North Korea, they're not going to stop until they achieve total hegemony in their region, and I think in other continents, Africa and beyond. That's the goal. And joining us now for reaction to my comments and the president's speech from New York, Gordon Chang. He's a Daily Beast columnist and an East Asia expert. And here in Washington with me, Mike Pillsbury. He's the director of the Center for Chinese Strategy at the Hudson Institute and the author of the fantastic book, The 100-Year Marathon. Let's start with you, Mike. The president's speech, first, your reaction to it.
Oh, I thought it was very good. He's able to balance the idea of threatening North Korea, but also holding out the path. He used the word path to them. And he also invoked Little Rocket Man's grandfather. I thought that was quite a brilliant touch. What your grandfather wanted is not what we have today in North Korea. It's really hell, he said. So he's shaming the grandson and then offering the path out toward economic growth, better relations, and then giving the price. You've got to give up these nuclear weapons. I thought it was a very good speech.
We're going to get to China in a moment, but Gordon, confronting evil, we see this in Texas, in the United States, with this horrific shooting, but the president confronted evil in his remarks tonight. Your perspective.
Oh, absolutely. You know, President Trump talked about freedom, free societies, free markets. The rest of the region, East Asia, heard this as America's response to China's Xi Jinping, who on October 18th gave his 3-hour, 23-minute work report, which is a speech that extolled the opposite, that extolled state domination of society, state-dominated markets. So it's very important for President Trump to say these things because it cut to the heart of the differences between the United States and China, and it also explained the strength of the American system, the strength of the free world. So I give him really high marks for doing this because that had to be said.
Now, I want to play a soundbite for both of you from President Trump last week. I interviewed him, and actually we'll play John Kelly first. We'll have time to get Trump. But this is General Kelly from last week in my interview, and I asked him about our relationship with China. Let's watch.
My hat's off to them for taking advantage of whatever they've been able to take advantage of to have that trade relationship. This president is committed to changing that relationship, but to do it in a collegial way.
Collegial way, changing our relationship with China. I did ask President Trump about it. We don't have time to play the whole bite, but he basically said, look, they're really helping us on North Korea. They're doing a lot to help now, and so it's not as simple. Essentially saying to me, Mike, it's not as simple as it was when I was talking about this issue in 2016 in the campaign.
President Trump has also kind of previewed what's going to happen tonight when he flies to Beijing. He said, we'll see. So he's left it open. I think General Kelly is known as a pragmatic sort of optimist who wants to get the best out of people who work for him. But he's decidedly more optimistic than the president, I think.
Gordon, the president delinked North Korea, our problem with, South Korea, and our trade imbalance with South Korea after that free trade agreement we signed with Bush, he delinked that from the helping South Korea and working with them against the North Korean threat. So he delinked trade from national security. But it doesn't look like he's going to do that with this Beijing event tomorrow. It looks like we're going to kind of back off a little bit on some of this concern or action against China on the trade cheating, which maybe that's just pragmatic, but it's a shame because we're really on the cusp of holding China accountable, and we might, I guess, not be able to do that now because of the North Korean threat.
I suspect that President Trump will go after China not only on trade, but also on North Korea, in South China Sea, Taiwan, cyber attacks, all the rest of it. And the reason is that, as you pointed out, China is challenging the United States across the board. And this is not just an Asia issue. You know, China is challenging the American democracy, American free societies. They do this almost every day in their propaganda, in People's Daily, Global Times, China Daily, all the rest of it. So President Trump really doesn't have a choice. He's got to confront this challenge in all of its facets. So I believe that despite what we've heard so far, that the president is going to be forced to do this. And if for no other reason, there's 2018 elections. You have Steve Bannon, who said he's going to make China the issue in every race. And that's a very important thing, because the challenge from China is, North Korea is a danger, but North Korea is only a danger because of China. China's been weaponizing North Korea. President Trump talked about that yesterday in Seoul. That's very important, that China is held accountable for sending weapons and arms and technology to the North Koreans.
I hope you are right, Gordon. I am concerned. Mike, a friend of mine today sent me an email about Goldman Sachs. China's sovereign wealth fund plans up to $5 billion in additional U.S. investments. And his message to me was, Goldman is helping China take over our industrial sector in the United States. A lot of money to be made with China buying up American companies, investing huge in the United States. Big money.
There's a book about it by Hank Paulson, where he pretty much recounts how he succeeded as representative of Goldman Sachs in doing just that. He showed the Chinese how to convert their state-owned enterprises and float them in Hong Kong or in Wall Street. And they thanked him. Goldman Sachs has announced over the years it's made billions and billions off this. They're very proud of it.
Remember Smithfield? China came in and bought. They wanted to buy, Gordon, semiconductor industry in Seattle. They were shut down by the Committee on Foreign Investment, but they got a lot of extra cash for that trade surplus. They got a lot of cash to float, and I don't think we're allowed to go and just buy huge industries in China. Are we, Gordon? Are we able to do that in Beijing?
No, we're not permitted to do that. And Xi Jinping, what he's done is he's taken state enterprises and he's made them invulnerable by essentially giving them state subsidies. And you mentioned this Made in China 2025 initiative.
A joke.
Which means to take 10 critical industries and make sure that China dominates them by the year 2025. Also, he's made a lot of these big state enterprises, already gargantuan, into formal state monopolies. In other words, reversing the process of reform. So, no, we can't buy that. And I think that in Washington right now, you have a consensus that China cannot be allowed to buy the American technology sector.
Yeah, Gordon and I disagree a little bit here. President Trump's got a strategy. Wilbur Ross has echoed it too recently. Personal relations with President Xi, the leader, the king as he called him, can go a long way toward changing the predatory policies of the Chinese.
I don't buy that. I think President Xi is so far ahead of the personal relation. I don't care how many times you have him at Mar-a-Lago. I don't care how much the red carpet is rolled out. They have a goal to dominate most industries in the world, and it might seem like a pie-in-the-sky thinking. I think they're well on the way to doing some of this.
Well,
space weaponry, all of this. But, Mike, you've become a powder puff. You've become,
no.
What is this?
What President
Relationship.
He's trying something here is very strategic.
It is.
He's going to give them a chance on their soil.
Okay, I got it. We're out of time.
He says, we'll see.
Okay, we'll see. Okay, we'll see. Gordon and Mike, great to see you both. And still ahead, establishment Republicans get socked tonight in Virginia. We're going to tell you why. Up next. Democrat Ralph Northam wins Virginia's governor's race, defeating Republican Ed Gillespie. President Trump sent his reaction to the results all the way from Asia, tweeting, "Ed Gillespie worked hard but did not embrace me or what I stand for. Don't forget, Republicans won 4 out of 4 House seats, and with the economy doing record numbers, will continue to win even bigger than before. Joining us now with a reaction from the Washington Examiner, Byron York, chief political correspondent there. Byron, Gillespie never jumped on board the Trump train. He's an old Bush hand. I think he gave it his best shot. He is who he is. He's not a populist conservative.
He did, but Virginia is essentially a blue state now. Northam won by 8 points. Hillary Clinton won by about 5 points. No Republican has won statewide since 2009. And it appears that, you know, those big suburban counties around Washington, D.C., just right over there, went even more for Northam than they did for Hillary, which I think
But what does that tell you? That tells you a populist conservative like Trump, who has a strong personality and a strong message, did do better. He didn't spend a lot of time campaigning in Virginia, Donald Trump. And Ed Gillespie tried to do this dance that I'm not going to campaign with Trump, but he'll tweet for me and he'll do a last-minute robocall. I think in the end that came off as desperate. And what if Gillespie had campaigned on preserving our history respectfully, Virginia first, law and order? Simple.
Well, the problem was Gillespie never felt comfortable with Trump.
Right.
Okay. So he's always asked about Trump, and you run for an office now, you're going to be asked about Trump.
But he looks uncomfortable, period. And the voters are smart in Virginia.
Exactly.
They didn't like that.
So they figured that he wasn't quite going to be himself, whatever that was. Now, we've known Ed Gillespie for a long time. He is as establishment Republican
lobbyist
as you can get. He was the head of the RNC. He was in the Bush White House, and he was a big lobbyist for a long time. So he's just a really establishment guy, and maybe he should have run as who he is.
Yeah. Well, I think in the end the Democrats are going to say, aha, Trump. First they were reporting that Gillespie keeps Trump at an arm's length. That was the narrative for most of then it was Gillespie edges right to become like Trump, because then they knew the storyline that they wanted was Trump has no momentum in Virginia. Has no momentum. He's going down the tubes. But let's remember, you pointed out 2009, Byron. Barack Obama won triumphantly in 2008. The 2009 special election was Chris Christie in New Jersey and Bob McDonnell.
The two bright new faces of the Republican Party.
Now they're both
not so bright.
Not so bright, maybe. I mean, I like Chris Christie a lot, and Bob McDonnell. I actually like him as well. But as a barometer for the future, what does it really mean?
Well, first of all, Obama went on after 2009 to really take a big beating in the 2010 midterms. There's just no doubt about that. And most presidents do take a beating in their first midterm. So what does this say about 2018 and Donald Trump? I don't know. Probably nothing very good. Look, Democrats are going to be very, very excited about this.
No,
but remember,
they need something to be excited about.
We just had a bunch of special elections. Remember
Otherwise,
those?
It's Donna Brazile.
They not so good.
Yeah, it's otherwise Hillary's emails.
But they're coming off this string of losses in special elections, and now they've got a win they can point to.
Yeah. Well, I think again, we'll see. They can get tax reform done. They can get this economy moving even in a faster pace. That will have a huge effect on the midterm elections. But they got to get it done. They got to put points on the board. If you're a Democrat, you got to be happy today. You got to be happy.
Talk to the Republican strategists trying to win 2018. They say if we do that, we'll win. If we don't, we're dead.
Byron York, always great to see you. Do not go away, because we're coming right back. Before we shove off this evening, more on why Republican Ed Gillespie lost his upset bid to become the next governor of Virginia. Now, remember last night, what did I say in The Angle? My book, Billionaire at the Barricades, Populist Revolution from Reagan to Trump, I made this point really consistently, that there is no middle ground with conservative populism. That is the wave of the future. That there is no constituency for open borders, open markets, and endless military interventionism. There's no constituency. So maybe Gillespie wouldn't have won if President Trump campaigned with him, but trying to be half in, half out with Donald Trump was never going to work. If you dip your toe just in a little bit, you're going to turn out like Ed Gillespie did, political roadkill. The glory days for the establishment Republicans are coming to a close. That's a fact. And we saw those results tonight. Up next, Shannon Bream. She has the big guest, Vice President Mike Pence. Take it away, Shannon.